What if you knew in your bones, in your flesh, in your skin, not just in your head, that in 5 or 10 years from now or less, what is familiar today won't be viable anymore? And what if we could respond from a space of emotional sobriety, relational maturity, intellectual discernment, and intergenerational responsibility? What would we be doing? How would we be spending our time? And if the children born today, and to put up 30 years from now, could look back at us, what kinds of action would they be thankful that you performed today?
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with me, Dan Burgess. The story of Spaceship Earth is simple. We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. Like a spaceship, we have a finite amount of supplies with an intelligent operating system called nature, which keeps everything replenished as long as we all respect it and participate wisely. In this podcast, I'm in conversation with folk involved in regenerating life, shifting consciousness and reimagining how we can live more beautifully and peacefully. I talk with artists, writers, activists, designers, adventurers, healers, farmers, creative mavericks, and more. Their stories invite us to participate in the co-creation of life-sustaining cultures, in service to life, becoming crew on Spaceship Earth. Greetings, Earthling. Welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast. Thank you for tuning in. This is Dan, your host. Welcome back if you're returning, and if this is your first listen, welcome to the podcast. We have been putting episodes out into the world since 2018. We've got over 100 sonic offerings to dig into, conversations, stories, music, gatherings with fine humans, proper crew on Spaceship Earth, exploring our relationality with the Earth through various lenses, and having difficult, open, vulnerable, honest conversations about the enormity of the challenges we're facing and how we can step more fully into service on this great big living spaceship called Earth. So welcome. So this episode is a conversation with Vanessa Andreotti, educator, author, activist, Dean of Faculty of Education at the University of Victoria, Canada, author of Hospicing Modernity, Facing Humanity's Wrongs and the Implications for Social Activism, which was published in 2021, and a co-founder of the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures collective. Vanessa's life work has been in education and learning. Her work is rooted in relationality, Indigenous knowledge, and centering our entanglement with the living Earth. She has worked extensively across sectors internationally and is a leading voice in global justice, global citizenship, Indigenous knowledge systems, and the climate and nature emergencies. Now, if you haven't read Hospicing Modernity, you may find some of this conversation challenging. Hospicing Modernity is not a comfortable read. It proposes that colonialism, racism, and other toxic divisions and cultural supremacies that inform the systems of capitalist modernity that we all inhabit run deeply inside us, perhaps neurobiologically. It invites readers into an uncomfortable unlearning journey of noticing, composting, letting go, and unmaking ourselves from the violent ways of seeing, relating, and being that capitalist modernity and industrial consumerist society has programmed. Through the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures artist collective, Vanessa and crew offer up deep experiential learning courses, practices, and metaphors to compost the weird shit that we're all carrying. WE.I.R.D standing for Western, entitled, individualistic, reductionist and delusional. This is not an invitation as a nice to have, but an unavoidable, essential part of clearing the space for something new and life-centred to emerge on this earth. If humans are to find ways through these unravelling times of the decaying and collapsing systems of modernity. The work we're being called to do runs very deep. Perhaps there's no way through without a decolonisation of ourselves and the destructive culture. Not that long ago, I used to question if this was really necessary. But the accelerating climate breakdown, Earth system overshoot, along with the silence in most of the West in the last year, as we've watched the live-streamed annihilation of the Palestinian people, confirms to me at least the scale and depth of the work to do. Because if regeneration is about care, connection, and putting life back at the centre, about the interconnection and interdependence of all life, about justice and equity for all beings, why is there still silence in most of the climate and sustainability spaces in our media and creative communities as we witness the most violent colonising and rampant destruction of people and land 24/7 on our smartphones, as politicians and mainstream media continue to deny what we can all see if we choose to see it, if we choose to witness it. And if you still can't see climate and ecological breakdown, violence to the earth through its entanglement with extractive colonial capitalism, racist and social injustice, and the military-industrial complex, essentially violence to people, then I'd suggest that we're still carrying the old story of separation. And there is an urgent need to begin to do the work of connecting the dots. Perhaps it might have something to do with WE.I.R.D, the Western, entitled, individualistic, reductionist and delusional traits of modernity, which Vanessa digs into in this conversation. A colonisation of mind and body and a deep separation from the living earth, a disease of separation. This conversation was recorded earlier this year at the start of the summer. We chat about how Vanessa is experiencing the work in this moment, some of the ideas from a new book forthcoming from the collective, and we talk a lot about the young, the next generation, and the call for intergenerational responsibility. We explore sitting with the shit, not avoiding the dark stuff, but facing into the uncomfortable grief, and why this composting work is so critical if we're to face into the future with humility and courage and with acceptance of the scale of the problems that this deep logic of modernity and ways of being has created. I think this is really a conversation about unlearning and learning. I feel a big theme here as we look into these times is how might we shift from a culture of entitlements to one of intergenerational responsibilities centred in our entanglement with the living earth. We have to learn quickly to see ourselves as one big human family. Maybe a dysfunctional, fucked up family, but family nevertheless. And we have to reject fully the dehumanisation of some humans, of some people, and the ongoing colonisation of lands. To absolutely reject colonial divisiveness and violence and the othering of some humans. To stand up for all life, to put life at the centre. As Bucky Fuller said 50 years ago, we're not going to be able to operate our spaceship Earth successfully, nor for much longer, unless we see it as a whole spaceship and our fate as common. It has to be everybody or nobody. So, if this episode speaks to you, please let us know. And if you're interested in the work of gesturing towards decolonial futures, we have hosted learning gathering in the past through Becoming Crew with Azul, one of the educators from the collective, and we're open to doing more if there's interest, so please let us know. As usual, if you dig what we're doing, please share, comment, rate, review, subscribe to the Substack, and flip to a paid subscription if you can. We really need more financial support to keep bringing these conversations, ideas and stories to you. So go and do whatever you can at becomingcrew.substack.com. So let's cut to it. This is the Spaceship Earth podcast with Vanessa Andreotti. Enjoy.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Vanessa, welcome to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
Thank you.
Where are you on Spaceship Earth right now, and how are you showing up in this moment?
That's a good question. I am located on the unceded ancestral land of the Esquimalt and the Songhees indigenous peoples. They are Lekwungen-speaking people. And there are other Lekwungen nations also, and some Choctaw-speaking nations that are connected to the space where I am. But I am on Earth right now. It is a beautiful spaceship and currently experiencing some turbulence. And this is maybe a meteor shower of different things coming at us. And as part of the spaceship, we are not just on the spaceship, we are the spaceship as well. Since our bodies are also land, and the spaceship is a metabolism that encompasses our body. So right now, how I'm showing up, lots going on. I have different responsibilities on the spaceship, and some of these responsibilities are quite demanding right now, especially in terms of intergenerational responsibilities we have right now in university. So I do work. Part of my responsibilities on the spaceship is with universities, and we see lots of protests on campuses and students really feeling the pain of the current moment and the grief, and us not having a space to process everything. And because of this lack of space and lack of intergenerational wisdom in processing everything that we need to process right now with so much violence going on. People were moving to forms of intelligence that are very narrow and that reinforce a kind of politics that is about entitlements to more entitlement. And we are hearing from other spaces of the spaceship that politics that might help us to heal our fractured relationships with the spaceship itself and with each other and with other species and within ourselves. The kinds of politics we need is one of responsibilities to more responsibility rather than entitlements to more entitlements. So figuring out how to, in the control panel, internal and collective, how to redirect the spaceship towards responsibility away from entitlement is one of the biggest challenges. And we don't know how to do it, basically, because we've been deprived of this knowledge. We've been impaired by a certain direction. And I've been thinking a lot about that and trying different things. And it's through trial and error we may stumble upon something that works.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you for that. You've spontaneously spoken to this question that I've been starting with this year. What are the vibes that you're experiencing? I'm just really interested in how people are experiencing this moment. You know, what does it feel like? Because yeah, we are clearly in a moment of lots of extremities, sort of extremities of that we can see and witness playing out, whether it's violence and divisiveness and overwhelm and, you know, all the kind of destructions that we can see, but also this kind of, at the same time, there are these sort of spaces opening up and a sense of extreme possibility in some ways as well, so it's kind of how to hold all of these contradictions. And it made me think, just as you were talking about responsibility, even I've been thinking, I can't remember who said it, but it was this idea that, like true freedom requires like radical responsibility, sort of like this idea that, actually, and I think the culture, at least, and it maybe brings us into the modernity frame, but this certainly as what I've witnessed on the short time that I've been on the spaceship, at least in this form, over the decades, this story of kind of freedom and progress, and in many ways that responsibilities are kind of like a burden almost, this sense to this idea of progress and freedom. Exploring responsibility right now feels such a big part of this, and where does that responsibility start and stop, and and we're all being
audit as well.
Right. Yeah. Wow. So listen, I wanted to, just a bit of context is why I've been wanting to speak with you, Vanessa. And it's like, I think I picked up your the Hospicing Modernity book. I think it was sometime in some lockdown. It might have been after I can't remember when it was. It felt around about the sort of pandemic time. And I guess my interest in many ways is because it felt like a book of that was. I mean, obviously, I call it a book because it's a lot more than that. I don't even know how to describe it. Sometimes there's so much in it. I think I was drawn to it because it's for me, it's a lot about learning and unlearning and knowledge, and what is even knowledge and who defines it, and I guess in our relationality to life, to ourselves, to this living spaceship. And for me, I think my shift has been coming from what over the years more outward face activism, and probably over the last decade really going much more inwards actually, and recognizing my own and our own entanglement, enmeshment, I guess, with these systems. And so I've gone from a sort of campaigning to I guess more of a becoming work. Is like, how do we work more on the becoming? And obviously, as you start going down that rabbit hole, you realize that there's so much stuff to let go of in order to sort of move through to something different. So I guess that was partly that drew me towards the Hospicing Modernity book and building up this. We have a practice-based community around the podcast we call Becoming Crew, and we're really trying to create spaces where we can, where we can show up, where we can explore the uncomfortable stuff, and where we can listen and try and expand our own sense of where intelligence lies, and really experiment, really, practice our way into something. And so for me, that's so much what's in the Hospicing Modernity book. And also, I guess, this increasing interest, we're starting to develop some youth offerings as well. I'm not constantly looking at the next generation and thinking there's a lot of the book is about how we notice and let go and sit with all the shit and all of the uncomfort and uncertainty, and that's the work that needs doing. And then there's part of me is also looking, which I've always felt over the years, because I have tended to work a lot more with people who are sort of in the system, mid-careers and onwards, who are sort of realizing all of this stuff. And part of me is always thinking like, why do we wait? Why aren't we working with the young, So there's a bit of context, I guess, for this session together, this conversation. And I guess also feeling like maybe it's a start point, as what you were speaking to, it's 2024. These things are becoming, I think this awareness is growing of sort of the enormity of what we're sort of facing into. And yet the kind of denial and the divisiveness also seems to grow. So I guess I wondered, like, how are you experiencing this work at this time?
Sure. In Hospicing Modernity, there was a saying that I reported. It's a saying in Brazil that says that in the situation of a flood, it's only when the water reaches your bums that you can actually swim. Before that, you can only walk or wade in the water. And the waters are definitely rising for more people. But how they reach the bottom, it depends on the context, where you are and what's happening around you. And in my area of work, I work in education, so we can see in the educational system, right, what is not holding anymore. So we have an enormous self-dysregulation, emotional dysregulation across the board. We have attrition, of course, teachers and shortages of teachers. But we have also a lack of ability to be present to the moment. So we are being crushed by the weight of the complexity on our back without having the capacity to hold it. So I've been using this metaphor of imagining the layers of complexity on our back, and it's crushing our back, and we need to figure out a form of education that can help us to safely pick this weight from our back, put it in front of us, and then lay it down on the earth so that it can be collectively composted and experienced, and the grief will need a space where it can move and move us into a different way of being. And if we don't do that, what will happen is that it will break our back. It will break the back of humanity, basically. We are setting ourselves on a course of premature extinction. And what we see right now, I think both in education and health, as canaries in the mine, what's not going to hold, right? Specifically, I think with children. And as you mentioned, also younger generation, our responsibility, our intergenerational responsibility to offer more than the single story of progress, development, and civilization that has been sold to us. People know already that the promises of the story are either perceived as broken or they're unrealistic from the outset, right? So
yeah, you've used that phrase "exhausted," I love that. That's very
exhausted.
These yes. Exhausted stories. Yeah,
authority has been exhausted too. So people are then looking for other things, and there are different ways of looking. And for other things, you can look for a replacement. You can look to fix the story, or you can hold stories very differently. So we're now. With the research collective, we're now writing another book. We're going to have to write it over the summer, called Outgrowing Modernity. And maybe it should have come before. And it is about the kind of neurogenesis that needs to happen for us to be present to what's presenting, for us to be taught by what's presenting. And in the book, we talk about 3 horizons of hope. 3 ways of thinking about horizons of hope. And one of them, the first one, is that we can just continue with the promises. We can try to fix promises and continue with the single story with minor amendment. Then there's another horizon of hope that says we need a replacement right now, and we need to know what this replacement is. And it will require major change, radical change, but we need to get to the point where we know what this change is. And there's a third horizon that says it's actually by confronting the results of the amount of neglect and irresponsibility and asshole that has been part of our relationship to the spaceship itself, then we will be taught. And that as we confront this thing, the lessons and the possibilities will open up. But if we skip that part, if we do not confront, we're just bound to reproduce similar things, right? In different formats, but still they are similar things. So figuring out how to invite people in a good way to be present to the shit at the same time that we increase our collective capacity to hold space for what's difficult, what's painful, without feeling overwhelmed, immobilized, without demanding quick fixes, and without demanding a rescue from that discomfort. is the small first necessary step for us to start that journey together. And that already requires us to be in neurogenesis, right? To be finding joy in different things, and to recognize that we have been neurochemically dependent on things that are delicious, but they're harmful, right? They're harmful to our bodies as well. They are harmful to the metabolic system that we're part of. They're harmful to other species. They're harmful to the relationships we have with each other. They're harmful to the relationship we have with our own self. And whether or not we will have the time to learn enough to correct course, it's another question. But even if we can't correct course and we are going to wrap up the experiment of this spaceship, still we have a choice in how we go extinct, right? So dying well is as important as living well in that sense, and opening people up to a different relationship with death and with time, with space, with self, is extremely important at this time. But educationally, it's a huge challenge because we're used to and conditioned by a kind of education that is about mastery of things, and kind of education that takes us into the state of visceral responsibility of depth, is not the same kind. So the kind of education we're talking about is one where we recognize we've been consuming a lot of experiences, information, even relationships and other stuff. And that has created a huge constipation. And that constipation doesn't allow us to digest what we have consumed. In that sense, we need probiotic education to help process and compost and digest. And we've been trying through the metaphors of shit, basically.
Yeah, love
to
it.
figure out how to make that lighter as well, using humor, using metaphor, using relational stories to draw attention to the motion, the mystery, and the mentor, both visible and invisible, of the whole. And I think it's important to know that because we put this information in front of people in a logical way, like with data of climate change. The way we've been trained in our reductionist way of thinking, it doesn't compute, right? So you will see the complexity of things, the multiple layers, and we are conditioned by our own education and the media and our socialization to notice the layers, but then we collapse these layers into one single layer. We impose a narrative of coherence. We edit out what doesn't fit the narrative, and we police the borders. And that creates a pressure cooker situation where, in the context of hypercomplexity, you have anxiety building, right? And also despair in that pressure cooker. And the pressure cooker explodes as a bomb onto other people, right? On the land or other species. So figuring out how to release that pressure safely and increase our capacity to hold everything is one of the main priorities.
There are two stories on Spaceship Earth, a passenger story and a crew story. The passenger story is based on extraction, transaction, and distraction, and it's leading us towards collapse. The crew story is based on connection, cooperation, and participation. It leads towards regeneration.
You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast with my dad, Dan Burgess.
Yeah, no, it's beautiful. It's like on your metaphor of the probiotics, and you talk about clearing space, this importance of clearing space, which is, we can feel that in our bodies, there's that when we're blocked, that need for that. But that depth, that mastery education and versus depth, and like you say, that then plays out everywhere, because we see that in the world of business, we see it in culture, whether it's people sort of have this sense that they're never good enough as these people because they have to have this mastery of something. So even that kind of sense of just participating for nothing more than participating, there's always this element of fear of hierarchy and competitiveness and all of these kind of qualities, again, which we know are, when we look at a wider web of living life of an earth that is alive, those qualities alone will destroy the conditions for life. So there's we've sort of got so stuck in this way of perceiving. We had a friend of yours, Bayaka Mafe, on a call the other night, and we were exploring this logic of whiteness, of this capture of thinking, and how, which feels to me very much, we're sort of speaking to the sort of same things, this inability to almost allow ourselves to create that space, to open up to these other ways of that. To me feels like that's the jump, because if you can, I know from my own little experiences of working with people, when we're able to create space where there's permission to sit with this stuff, to explore it, to work with it, then things start to happen. But actually the biggest challenge is creating the space.
And removing the clutter. Yeah. Inviting people out of the clutter. Yeah. So there is this thing about separability, right? So the Hunikui people in the Amazon, in the University of the Forest now, that we have a project around that. They talk about the root problem being the separation between us and the rest of nature. We are also part of nature. And we need to understand that in more complex ways. So there is a way in which we can understand the separation as removing the intrinsic value of your life, right? And then you having to produce value in certain predetermined economies to feel deserving of being alive within modernity, right? And that is what creates then the hierarchy between species and cultures and individuals and the competition. So it's that kind of like an intrinsic sense of worthlessness that then needs this production of value to give you a sense of worth, and how it plays out in our communication, right? It's always a transaction or an investment in a stock market of superiority and inferiority. And unless we get to a point where we find within ourselves that intrinsic value, it's very difficult to be present to each other and to the spaceship and the reality of the cosmos, where the spaceship is traveling, without making it about you, right? So the Hunikui also have this teaching about, in Western societies, our sense of identity, our sense of belonging, our sense of vitality is dependent on constructs, human constructs, that are part of this narrativization of reality and progress and development and civilization. And these constructs are inherently much limited because they have an embedded exclusivity to it. And they say, we can't simply kind of escape from that. We have to deal with that. That's part of the shit we need to compost. Materially, organically, we also have an umbilical cord connected to the spaceship. And this umbilical cord is the actual source of vitality, identity, and belonging. However, the moment we name it, it's not it. You're back to the construct, the human construct. So figuring out how to have this unmediated experience of this umbilical cord as also an antenna where you receive information from the earth itself, telling us what to do, basically.
Right. And
designing us as beings that are tethered to everything within the metabolism of the spaceship of the earth is extremely important. So for them, the disease of separation or separability is a terminal disease. It's it's a neurobiological impairment that is degenerative and that leads us to turn on each other, basically, for perceived entitlements and pleasures and enjoyments that have nothing to do with the viability of life of the whole. and the long-term viability of this life. So figuring out how to move us from this setup of pleasures into a setup of different kinds of joy, right? Of being together. And there's joy in composting shit. Well, what Bio would call it's an issue movement, the trickster move.
Yeah. A shape shift.
A shape shifting that needs to bypass the defenses of the ego. And part of this bypassing is to make these defenses visible without having them attack the messenger, right? And therefore humor, art, and a form of compass that can direct us to a place that is difficult, because right now, what is necessary is not intelligible, right? We might sense it in the gut, and we are being asked to hold the line of responsibility, even when it's unimaginable, right? That as human beings, we can, and have a different neurobiological setup that will be able to move with the storms that are coming to us. So another day we had a conversation within our collective, and it was about intergenerational responsibilities, where we were talking about how within modernity, the kinds of politics that are intelligible they follow six, and I'm not sure if I'm going to remember all of them, but there's exceptionalism. Somebody needs to be exceptional. Then there's exaltedness. We need to sing the praises of this group or person that's changing everything. Then there is also externalization of culpability. So that person needs to be innocent and pure, or that group needs to be innocent and pure and beyond reproach. Then there's escape from responsibility. And there is an expansion of entitlements to those who align with this change maker archetype. And then we were thinking about kind of politics that would be necessary if we place the complexities in front of us, and if we were guided by a compass of wisdom, of relational wisdom. And the compass we talk about is related to emotional sobriety, relational maturity, intellectual discernment, and intergenerational responsibility as the 4 markers where we need to go. So if we could be guided by that compass, what would be the metaphor, right, for the kinds of politics that are necessary? And what came up was very funny. It was going facing the storm, becoming part of the storm so that you can be in the eye of the storm, walking a tightrope while practicing capoeira and juggling at the same time. That is the kind of politics that is needed, with the care, with the relational rigor and the intellectual rigor that is necessary for to be in the zone, right? To be able to do all this acrobatic things. And that's pretty much how I feel every day, having to work with different groups as you are. So with groups of students, groups of teachers, groups of academic administrators, groups of academics, communities, indigenous communities that we work with as well. It's not a single answer or a formula or a silver bullet solution. You need to be thinking on your feet all the time, asking all the time, what's the most responsible next small step within reach that will bring people to more emotional sobriety, relational maturity, intellectual discernment, and intergenerational responsibility, while you try to bypass the defenses of their ego, your ego, and compost whatever.
It's exhausting, isn't it?
It's just being thrown at you. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I really feel that. There's a lot comes up as I'm listening to you. I mean, one thing just fascinates me, as well as all of the kind of pressure that's going on, but it's fascinating and slightly odd that we have these, we have our mainstream political systems that are still trying to hold themselves together with this very binary, divisive nurse. We've got massive elections going, and then yet there's all of this work that's going on the ground. There are so many people that are kind of trying to practice these new ways, which I find, again, for me, that's like when I sort of bump up against those that are quite wedded on, well, what else is possible? What else do you suggest? And you sort of, that there's this extraordinary stuff that's being worked on and has been for a long, long time. And so I'm constantly thinking, how, when does that all begin to sort of merge? Do you know what I mean? Or start to sort of, when does the dominant system begin to open up to these other ways? And will that even happen? Or is it just a sort of an unraveling that will go on and an emergence of something new? I don't know. So that was coming up as you were speaking. But also when you were talking to, the separation, the severance, and I know this comes up a lot in the book, and it's something for me that's very alive in my own inquiries and through the work is the body, and also the body's connection with the living earth, and at least again in the culture that I've grown up in, it's such a heady culture. It's everything has been, it's all up here, and so for me that feels like again one of the really big challenges, barriers, whatever we want to call it, is helping us move into other ways of knowing, which is very much part of a core part of your work. But also it's really interesting. I think it was actually on one of your sessions with Chief Nunawar where you were talking about, the body is part of the land, and this kind of severance that has happened over the, centuries, let's say, but has really accelerated. It's in many ways, it seems it's become more, again, sort of more extreme. But then what I experienced through practice and other teachers and our own inquiries is that the more we're able to practice exploring the body's relationship with this living world, actually the more possibilities open up. So rather than, we're stuck in this modernity, it can feel so overwhelming. We're all kind of captured in this logic of binary divisiveness and who's going to outsmart each other, and it's so exhausting. And yet when you're able to build a relationship with a landscape or and a community and your body, and then things start to open up that you just didn't even know were possible. And then you speak about this compass, and that when I look at what's coming down the line, this it feels like to have that ability to sort of tune our own compass, that just feels so vital. So I just wonder whether we could speak a bit to that and what you're learning with that. And yeah.
Yeah, thank you. I love the compass. I hadn't thought before. I just wrote it down. So it's interesting because, yes, there is a tendency to over-intellectualize. And kind of learning again that the funicular people in the Amazon are talking about is learning that happens in the gut. Mm. So with the artists in the collective, we're trying to draw attention to the gut. And it as a site of multiplicity, we depend on the bacteria that are there to be alive, right? We are already in relationship with those things. And extending that to, because when we think about relationships, we still think about things that we can describe in form, right? So we think about people, we think about the environment, but we have a relationship with language. We have a relationship with stories. We have a relationship with time. We have a relationship with space. We have a relationship with, of course, the body. And we have a relationship with our gut and the bacteria in our gut, and with the fecal matter that this bacteria produces as a way to give us nourishment. It transforms the food into something that the land is then going to transform back into soil where the food's going to grow, right? So that movement of things is not something that we are conditioned to pay attention to. We are conditioned to paying attention to form. So our relationship to movement, and to, in that sense, our relationship to sound, to everything that is making out, composing the space we're in right now, in extending our senses or our attention to the perception of different things really helps calibrate that compass, right? We call it SMDR, sobriety, maturity, discernment, and responsibility. But one thing we found that's been interesting in the exploration of the gut, and there are many layers to that. One of them is vulnerability, right? When other animals want to show vulnerability, they expose their belly. And one of the exercises we have in the book that's being written is about the sense of having your gut opened up and your intestines exposed for other people to smell and they fix it. And that's the sensation, right? The visceral sensation of, I don't want to do that because my guts are my own. Thank you. I'm very well protected. So we're inviting in the book people to think humorously about this sense of disgust that we have in relationship to what happens over there. And one of the, and again, another funny image that came in our inquiry is the image of a weird tapeworm. And the weird tapeworm, other people have written about weird as being Western educated, industrialized, and I can't remember what the US developed, I think, or something like that. We are rewriting it as Western still, but entitled, super entitled, individualistic, reductionist, and delusional tapeworm, because it's very delusional about its own self-importance, right? So we all have the tapeworm because of it's the part of the biome of the metabolism as well. And identifying the characteristics of the tapeworm is very important. So part of the characteristics of the tapeworm are 5 A's. So the tapeworm is very interested in affirming its moral authority, moral and epistemic authority. It's interested in affirming its unrestricted and unaccountable autonomy. So it wants to be free and do whatever it wants without having to, without consequence, right? Then it's also interested in the affirmation of innocence, virtue, and purity. And it's interested in the arbitration of justice, lawfulness, and common sense. And it's also interested in its legacy, right? And those A's leads to the 5 or 6 E's that we talked about in terms of politics of exceptionalism and entitlement. So the worm has 5 A's or 6 A's and 6 E's, and it needs to be made present. So it's hidden in your belly, and we need to find a way to either. And there's the other thing about the tapeworm is that if you leave it in the belly, it's one thing. It's really bad for your digestion because it sucks all the nutrients that are coming through your body. But also, it can go to your brain. It can go to your heart. That's what tapeworms do, right? So if you have that kind of authority, autonomy, arbitration in your heart, we do see it very explicitly in whiteness, but it's not exclusive to whiteness. Any form of cultural supremacy or cultural superiority has the characteristics of 4. And we need to figure out a way of either having a controlled diarrhea where the or come out or pull it out, right? In one way or another. And engaging in collective practice that can make the worm visible is a way of shedding the arrogance, right? And finding the kind of humility that it needs to be with each other in vulnerability, right? In the kind of vulnerability that says, like, we all have asshole in our bus, right? They are conditioned by society. So there's a responsibility there to not let the asshole drive the bus. That's the basic agreement in the group, and to parent and support, because you can't kill the asshole in the bus. You can't throw him out of the bus or them out of the bus. But you can figure out a way to have more mature and more sober, serene and discerning and responsible drivers, having holding the space. Maybe that's the best word for it. So convincing people that something else is necessary. I think people are only open to hear that when what used to work is not working anymore, right? Because otherwise they go back to promises of what worked in the past, and they believe it will continue to work. But when they're open to the invitation to try a different way of engaging, a different way of relating, a different way of feeling, I believe that cognition, thinking, is part of it, but it's not something that is the first thing that happens. I think the first movement happens in the gut, as we learned from 2 degree. Then the heart moves, and the head follows, right? It's not, because if we present this information to people, most people are going to over-intellectualize. And that's why metaphor and humor, and it does the shape-shifting that you need to appeal to different neurotransmitters to kick in, so that you don't go to the usual spaces that you would normally go if you're trying to assert an opinion or assert your value as a knowledgeable human being and compete with each other for who has the higher moral ground, right? So we have to figure out a way to trick that and embark on a very different motion of being together, and of being together with grief, right? So part of being entangled is what it's interesting, because a lot of the work that we've done in the experiments we've done in the collective about entanglement, we noticed that people want to be entangled with everything that's beautiful, like the whales, the sun, the moon, the trees, but not the shit.
Right.
Sanitize that part.
Right.
And we want to be elated, right? But being entangled is entangled with everything. The good, the bad, the ugly, the fuck that, right? So developing the stomach to be present to all of this, the shit, and the joy of composting shit, and the pain of composting shit, and everything. So developing the stomach to be present to everything without throwing up, without throwing a tantrum, and without throwing in the towel, is, I think, the first thing that we can do for ourselves and for each other. And as we expand that capacity, we will only see the results of it when we face some shit hitting the fan, right? And then we see that there are other options of response rather than the responses that are already conditioned for you to, as a form of response. So in every context, I think it's going to be different, and we will need to find the metaphors and the humor that will be able to move the things, and the humility and the honesty that need to come with that. But as things get more difficult and more painful, I don't think we're going to have a choice.
We live on a life-giving rock called Earth, hurtling through space. How bonkers is that? You're listening to the Spaceship Earth podcast.
If you'd like to support the running of the Spaceship Earth podcast, head over to our Substack and sign up. You'll get every episode straight to your inbox, weekly writing, plus other crew offerings. We're grateful for whatever you can give. Join us at becomingcrew.substack.com.
Gosh, wow! There's it's amazing to just visualizing that whole, I guess, which speaks to the, what you speak to in the book, this idea of, metabolism and this relationship, and actually thinking about, what comes into us, what comes into the gut, that relationship with the living earth, and then what moves up towards the heart. And I heard someone last year saying, the brain is a seed from the heart. It's kind of like, so it's just it's a sort of lovely to see that relationality actually, and to to feel that relationality, I guess is the thing. can we talk about the shit for a bit? Because there's something, because, this whole idea of like you're saying, I want to be entangled with all the beautiful stuff, but, people are sort of like very allergic. And of course, there's so much around that, right? And, and we can speak to the, death and dying and anything that's kind of like rotting, or, anything that's we've hidden away in the kind of culture of modernity. And there was this story, and because the book is just full of beautiful stories and anecdotes that you share and connect to these frames, which is what I love it. There's a sort of like there's so much to kind of provoke and work with. But you had that section on toilet teachings, which just really spoke to me on for so many levels. But even that idea of, I've often thought that, I thought it as a kid actually, but I've often thought the way that's, where does the shit go? Like it's just hidden away by these kind of flushing systems, and you kind of think, what's going on there? And actually it's interesting how, I wonder if you could talk a bit to that story. And there's also something about this expectation that shit should just be sorted, not seen. And I don't know, it just came up for me reading the book. And I guess there's something in that speaks to this aversion to, what is something that comes out of us, right?
You did in your cave from 2002 to 2006. And one of the things that really marked my time there was this realization about how recycled the water is. And at the time, there was an article in The Guardian about antidepressant in the water, because people were taking so much that, and it was around 2002 to 2006, with much less antidepressants that we have right now, right?
What is in there now? I don't even want to know, but yeah.
With the metabolism of the water, it was impossible to filter that out. So we were being given secondhand antidepressants through the water that came through the pee of people who the body is not even being able to metabolize the amount of antidepressants, and then this being recycled in the whole of the population. And that, I remember sitting with that for a long, long time. And that was probably around the same time that I visited Mama Maria for the teachings of the There's No Way, the chapter There's No Way.
Yeah.
And really realizing how it's a disconnect with our own body, basically. Right. And in the book, there is one of the teachings from one of the communities where an NGO wanted to build toilets for tourists to come, and the women resisting it. It's saying, and there was a difficulty in articulation there. But what I was told was that we would not be able to read where this poop goes and what happens to it, and where in how we are entangled with it, and how we navigate that space where that composting happens. And I did have that realization that I am completely illiterate in these metabolic literacies that are necessary if you are open to seeing the whole cycle of things. And that was scary. Actually, that realization was a very scary realization. So the book asks us to develop a different relationship with food. Think about where it's going, and also thanking those beings that will receive that what's coming out of your body, right? And turn it into new soil. And then somebody once also challenged me and said, like, some of things cannot be composted. Some things are, or maybe it cannot be composted in regular cycles. They will take much, much longer cycles to be composted. And this was an interesting realization as well. That actually went into an exercise we have in the new book also about grandmothers. So we asked people to calculate the number of grandmothers that or birthing people who were necessary for you to be here, 7 generations, right? I believe the number is 255, counting your generation as the 8th generation. So you have 255 birthing people, And then you have another 255 people who are inseminating people, but the birthing people are with you all the time. And these birthing people are on your bus in one of the decks, and they carry their own shit too that has not been composted, right? And in the exercise, we ask people to think about several things. Some of the things related to questions of patriarchy and whiteness, and how many of them have had to suffer under these systems. And so there's part of the exercise that is about understanding their suffering, but there's also part of the exercise that is about understanding their complicity in suffering. So how many of them were mean? How many of them? And then we talk also about how many of them could do cartwheels, how many of them enjoyed life, how many of them were depressed, how many of them died by suicide, right? So how did they process their grief? And what is it that they're bringing epigenetically to you, to your being? And part of the exercise there, the conclusion of the exercise is a conversation with them, asking them, each of them, 250 watts, to separate their shit into 3 piles. Pile number 1 is what each of them can compost on their own, and asking them to compost it. Then there's another pile, which we say like about 5%, where they need help to compost. They need your help to compost it. And then 1% of the shit is the kind of nuclear waste shit, right? That just needs to be placed in a safe space in the spaceship, where it's going to be there for a long time to be composted over a much larger temporality. But we need to pay attention to that, because if we're carrying with us toxic waste from 7 generations, 250 birthing grandmothers, then the implications for that, for our relationships, for our relationship with ourselves, for our interrelationships with other people and other species and the land, it has enormous implications in terms of being reactive, like the nuclear reaction in our body. So figuring out a way to articulate these things, understand that we are bringing with us some nuclear waste, right, already in the body.
Yeah.
And metaphorically, probably not. And that there is a responsibility, right? We can't, all these people who have given birth, they suffered a lot under colonialism, under hundreds of years now, different kinds of colonialism. And some of them haven't had a chance to heal, right? And this ancestral healing, when I'm talking about ancestral healing, is both to those who have come before and those yet to come. But there is a responsibility to those who have come before to correct their mistakes and redirect our infrastructure, our neurobiological infrastructure, away from the harm and towards healing and towards a different form of existence where, at best, we will be able to, if we can't stop this course of action towards premature extinction, at least we will be able to die well.
How do you experience when you're working? And I know with the collective, obviously you're working a lot with kind of artists and trying to find ways to help people, I guess, work with all of this. But when you're working, I'm sort of curious about the younger generations. I'm really curious about, like, when you're working with younger students, how do they respond, particularly to this, the more difficult stuff, the more like sitting with the shit, right? Versus, I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to understand, like, where there's, because my sense, not that I'm working at this depth, but my sense is when I work with a younger generation around exploring the story of separation, right, and how it plays out in our systems and through us, and they genuinely, seem able to kind of move into that, understand, notice it, and begin to let go of it actually a lot faster. And I guess that's just because their time. But I'm just curious about, again, we see all these protests going on all the universities, and I've heard people go, oh, should they just be getting on with it? And I'm like, they're young people. They're in places of learning. This is where they're supposed to challenge everything, right? And But I'm wondering how what's your experience of working with this work that you're doing, and what's the experience of the younger generation, and particularly around the really, the uncomfortable stuff?
I think that they all feel shortchanged already, so they're smart. They
Yes.
can read the room, and because of how they've been trained also by multiple tabs in technology, they don't have much problem with the layering of reality, right? But they also don't have much experience processing stuff because the intergenerational sharing has been interrupted for them, right? The time they spent on screen. And one of the things that came up in one of the visits we had to Brazil, to one of the indigenous communities, that I think is W.E.I.R.D community, was that they thought it was absurd that we would put children in age cohorts for 5 hours a day with 1 hour of them, like 30. We don't want for them to, and that's completely absurd because that interrupts also the natural way of learning with each other, right? Across generations. And when I started thinking about intergenerational sharing, I was usually thinking about, okay, me from one generation talking to somebody else from another. But actually, that's not what they meant. What they meant was the kind of processing that happens in intergenerational sharing is when you are listening to different people talking from different generations or from the same generation without you having to be the speaker, right? It's a place where you can actually process what's happening without the pressure on you, right? To respond. So we've lost that. That is the thing, this processing time, right? Of listening to other people talking and processing things is how we used to process as well. And now we have the technology addressing you directly. Right? You are always on the spot to respond. So in many ways, that has also conditioned this younger generation or the incoming generations to be very much of the standard. And that creates other problems in terms of perceived entitlement and how they perceive agency and power and voice. So it is challenging because we've never had this before. We've never had that whole generation having their primary relationship established through social media or their primary perception shaped by a screen, right? It is new. Some educational philosophers talk about it as like in the future, we will look back and we will see that this was child abuse, right? To deprive people of or to channel all the attention into one mode of perception and communication. So there are challenges. I see, as you see, an easier move into discussing more complex issues, but I also see a difficulty in being, but there is a yearning for being in the body, but also a difficulty in coming to that. I witnessed a group of the students in the protest having a conversation, and I could see like them redirecting each other towards depth and towards this embodied intelligence. And I thought that was extremely inspiring, that they have the direction, they have the yearning, but this yearning can be captured by algorithm and it can be weaponized in different directions as well. So instead of, I see a lot of people also romanticizing, idealizing the students, which is problematic. What I tend to do in this context is to say, look, we need to talk about intergenerational responsibility here. And the first step of the intergenerational responsibility is us learning to compost our own shit, right? And not socializing down the line of generation unprocessed shit. So the legacy we can leave is new soil once we process our own stuff. So we have to think about legacy very differently. And it's interesting because the kinds of stories that younger people now need to hear are not the stories we're ready to tell because we haven't processed them yet. So, for example, hearing about the protests in 1968 would be extremely useful, but not in a heroic way. We need to learn the messy bits, what didn't go well, what the mistakes were, what context was there that isn't right now. So we need a much more humble storytelling that generally people from that generation are not like it's either an idealization or a vilification. We need to get out of the narrative of villains, victors, and innocent deserving victims to be able to get into the messiness of it, which is what they now need to process, right? Otherwise, they will feel powerless and latch on to very simplistic answers that they don't know the second and third order implications of, right? That create more, may have a potential, that has a potential to create more harm than good.
Wow, gosh, it's back. We're back to the shit, aren't we? There's so much fertilizer in the shit if we're prepared to put it out and throw it around us and sit with it and share it around. It's fascinating thinking about these kind of spaces, you know, what our current spaces of learning look like, and obviously again there's separation going on there because we've sort of said, oh, you know, learning happens in these places, and of course we know the human is just sort of designed to be a kind of always on learner in whatever ways make sense to the individual, but the need for spaces, this intergenerational that you're talking to, you know, that quality of listening, you know, is so underrated in modernity. Listening, you know, it's like you know, slowing down and like you say, creating a space. We were talking the other night how sort of performative everyone feels, that the culture is so performative. Like sometimes they're just doing things and they don't even know why they've done it, but they felt it was so deep, this sense I have to project my knowingness or my answer. And so often when we actually sit with the not knowing, when we sit with this, like you say, we're decentering who the knowledge holder is, and the knowledge can be coming from, it could be coming from the trees, it could be coming from your gut, it could be coming from this person over there that you've never given the time to, but now you're, you know, so there's just this. So the spaces feel so key, creating the, you know, the space and the conditions and the sort of the invitations, like you say, to be able to be vulnerable and to share the shit. I might call this episode "Sharing the Shit."
Must collectively. Yeah. So part of this decluttering that is necessary is to recognize that if we are fighting over human constructs, it is generally tied to a sense of worthlessness, right? That we have to prove something to somebody, that back to the authority, autonomy, arbitration, affirmation of innocence and all of that. But once you can surrender that, even if for a little bit, you have the chance to reconnect with that antenna, which is the umbilical cord, and to receive the information about where it is that you need to be. Right? So it's that sense of identity, belonging, and vitality that is not dependent on the validation of other people, right? It's something that comes intrinsically. And once you have that, you will know you carry a medicine. And you also know that you need to cook your medicine, that your medicine is a poison also, depending on how much you give or where or for what, right? And that you need to integrate medicine with others. And for that to happen, you need to, it's trial and error. You have to see what it does when you try something. And that experimentation is also accountable, right? To your own medicine, to the medicine of others. But learning to move in the direction of the integration of medicine so that we can heal our fractured relationships with the land, with each other, within ourselves, is a different movement, has a different rhythm, sounds differently than trying to compete to see who has the answer or who is going to be the exceptional person or group that is the most deserving or that's going to save us all. And thinking about the time that we have that is very precious right now and very sacred, how much do we waste?
Yeah.
Not having the conversations of consequence that matter and having just the neurotic conversations, right? That are trying to placate a sense of insecurity or a sense of impotence or a sense of anxiety that we believe needs to be placated for us to be able to move. But, or we believe that there needs to be a certainty or some level of control for us to move. When actually, if we trust the wisdom, the relational wisdom of the umbilical cord and the metabolic wisdom of the earth itself, we will arrive at different possibilities, right? That will come through the gut, invade the heart, and compel the head to follow.
Beautiful. I had a question on, I mean, you referenced the modernity as, I think it was self-infantilization. And I guess for me, I've been really curious about, again, and I know that many indigenous cultures would say this, that seeing the human as the baby, the sort of, as well as the kind of, we sort of arrived here last. We've got the most to learn. But this idea of this time, let's say 500 years, and this acceleration in the last kind of 5-6 decades, where it's just gone, this kind of neoliberal, I guess, whatever we want to call it, where this kind of quite extreme systems have accelerated, and it's kind of interesting in this space of humility to look at that as a sort of like you refer to in the book, that it's time to kind of grow up, and it struck me as I've been very curious with rites of passage work, and again how an initiation and cultures, and at least in the dominant Western culture that I've grown up in, is just really non-existent, and particularly rites of passage work on land, and particularly around that idea of learning to for your sort of your childhood, letting go, a dying, a kind of shedding, and moving into a different being that has that is guided through to connect with that bigger sense of self and that responsibility to something that's connected to our own uniqueness, but is there to serve, I guess, is how I would look at it. And again, I know it feels again to me like when you are able to have those kind of experiences, particularly on land, where, because we don't create the space. That's the problem I see so much, this space to be alone, this space to sort of to know yourself differently, to maybe receive this intelligence beyond what modernity can give us. And you speak of modernity as almost this hospicing is in some ways an initiation. It's a kind of an invitation into that. But at the same time, really at a really personal level, I'm really interested in that need, and for communities obviously to be part of that process. But yeah, how's the rites of passage work? I mean, do you see signs of that growing? I mean, where do you see that, this relationship between the culture and the individual's need for initiate? I guess also with the work that you do with the University of Forest and how, just wondered if there was some thoughts on that.
So metabolically, I think the rites of passage are happening. They're not orchestrated by human beings, but climate change could be one of them, right? That we're going through, and it's orchestrated by the land, the land itself. So I think that there's different layers happening at the same time, and in one of them, the other thing that I've heard before is that if we don't create the conditions for the rites of passage within the culture, yet people will find it in other ways. So there's an opioid crisis here in what's known as Canada, right? That could be also seen as an emergent rite of passage for kids who are looking for this transition and they can't find it in the culture.
Right.
And so creating opportunities for, and rites of passage have certain elements to it that we in the Western culture have not been taught or they have a direction, they have certain components, and there is a component in the one that I have encountered. There is always a component shifting your relationship with pain and learning to grieve, and there is a direction towards aging and eldership. So, if we looked at education not as if we stop idealizing and romanticizing youth and neglecting and vilifying aging, we could possibly think about education, as many Indigenous cultures do, as preparing people to become good elders and ancestors for all relationships, right? And that changes everything we do, everything. And because these are not just elders and ancestors of human relationships, they are also elders and ancestors of non-human relations, right? So figuring out this shift in educating and in parenting and in bringing people into the world, as from the day they're born, we're already seeing an elder, right? An elder who has come before as well. So there's also the authenticity coming through and understanding ourselves as part of a continuum. There's the story of the Four Mountains in the book that this is one of the stories that really lands with young people too. And this is probably because Western culture does not give a script of aging apart from being successful by accumulating property this individualism. So an understanding of aging as integration and eldership and an extension of responsibility, also as the processing of mistakes. So an elder is an elder because of the mistakes we've made and learned from, rather than getting it right. It's not about getting it right. So figuring out a different way to carry people through the motion, right, of life, and in a way that doesn't attempt to negate death, right? Seeing death as part of this as also a rite of passage is extremely important, I think. But boy, it's a lot of work.
Yeah, no, and it's beautiful to hear that sharing as well. And it feels to me, all these things obviously are kind of like they're all cycles and within this whole bigger system that we're a part of. But it just feels like you say, it's this co-creation of new knowledge that's coming from people and landscapes and intergenerations, and that's knowledge that feels like we can trust.
It's interesting because it's knowledge that is movement. It's knowledge as motion, it's a directionality, rather than knowledge as form, which needs to be in the book, right? And then if you capture it in the book, that's not the motion anymore.
Right, it's the words versus worlds, and yeah, no, absolutely. So it's fascinating. Really, really. Gosh, I'm conscious of time, and I'm sure we could talk about all kinds of things here. But I was just wondering whether was two things I always ask guests is we're sort of we explore the story of the spaceship Earth on this podcast, and we're definitely not exploring it from a point of view as like we're flying this thing. Because we know that's the story of modernity, and we know that that story of we like to sort of say, well, it's a passenger story, which I think is it's a parallel to this story of modernity, which is really based on the qualities or the behaviours of kind of extraction, transaction, distraction. That's how I'd simplify it. And then there's this kind of crew story, which we're sort of interested in, which again is in many ways, and this idea of becoming, because we're not sort of seeing ourselves as knowing what to do, because the operating system on the spaceship is way too complex and mysterious to really understand. But we do know that we are having impacts on this spaceship. So we know that if we're having impacts, then there's ways that we can move into a different relationship. So this kind of spirit of becoming crew, which is more around connection and cooperation and participation. What does that invitational provocation of becoming crew? What comes up for you, Vanessa? What can you leave us with?
You have reminded me of another exercise that is coming up in the new book. It invites people to, we're not using the metaphor of the spaceship, but we're using the metaphor of an experiment. So we are part of this experiment that is the spaceship Earth. And this is the experiment 365,000 words. And it's going to wrap up. And the invitation is to leave a letter to the next experiment. Then when it rewinds to 200 years before or 500 years before, what have you learned that made this experiment not work, right? It's a thought head-heart experiment that really helps us see as crew that there is there in one layer there's finite. In another layer it isn't, because it resets. And there are multiple dimensions, and time is not linear, and space can be bent. But if we were to take stock of what we've learned right now about what didn't work, right? Because without that taking stock, it's going to be very hard to weave something different, right? And because everything that we're placing in the teleology we have about the future is a kind of a rescue of something we want to see that we're aspiring to in the present. But we need to kind of bracket that and stay with everything that went wrong without feeling desperate, without feeling overwhelmed, and without feeling immobilized. Once we can land that, another possibility is open. And until then, we need to dance towards that space where we can say, like, we got it. Like, we understand what took us here. Yeah. And what cannot take us into something different.
Beautiful. And the other, I guess the other question is just whether there's something you might leave listeners with. It could be a practice, it could be an invitation, it could be a provocation, but in the spirit of crew, we're trying to encourage us to sort of participate in, go and do something or try something. And so I guess wonder whether there was something you might leave us with.
I think I'll leave with the question. So the new this I've been writing with the collective, so I can't disentangle from that right now. But the new book starts with the question: what if you knew in your bones, in your flesh, in your skin, not just in your head, that in 5 or 10 years from now or less, what is familiar today won't be viable anymore? And what if we could respond from a space of emotional sobriety, relational maturity, intellectual discernment, and intergenerational responsibility? What would we be doing? How would we be spending our time? And if the children born today, and to put up 30 years from now, could look back at us, what kinds of actions would they be thankful that we perform today?
I love that. Thank you so much. It's been a real treat to have a conversation, and for all the work that you've been offering out into the world. It's very gratefully received in these times. So thank you, Vanessa.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure.
Got something received from that conversation with Vanessa. I know there's a lot in there it's difficult. It's not easy to process what is going on, but there is extraordinary work like the work of the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures Collective and many other practice communities to get stuck in to starting to do the work. And there is, although you might not think it, a lot of joy in doing this work, because we begin to see how absurd so many of the things we thought were normal actually are. So, yeah, give us a shout out if you enjoyed this episode. Maybe share it with a friend. Leave us a comment. Drop us a mail. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to hear how this is landing. Subscribe to the Substack, becomingcrew.substack.com. You'll get all the episodes into your inbox. Like I said before, if you can afford to give us a few quid, please flip to the paid subscription. We really need more financial support to keep going with the pod. And we have the evolving Becoming Crew practice community. We are planning more events and gatherings, both online and on land, later this year, and a whole range of events and gatherings for 2025. Basically, it's how we show up together and listen together and share and laugh and cry and practice the new moves, rehearse the new moves for a more beautiful, caring, life-centered, connected culture that must emerge from the rubble of modernity. But it's going to require us all to do the work. There are no passengers on Spaceship Earth. We all must step into service, becoming crew on this great big biological, ecological, mythological spaceship. So come and join us. We'd love to see you. Look after yourself out there. Yeah, these are crazy times. Hug those close to you. And get out onto the land as much as you can and open up to the more than human intelligence that's there also to help guide us through these darker times. Until next time, peace and out.
This podcast is created in service to life, for you. It takes time, funds and energy to make. If you'd like to contribute to the running costs, you can donate the price of a cuppa or a pint. Find the link on our website. This podcast wouldn't exist without the following crew: Charlie Shred, Audio Jedi; Seaman Home Burgess, Engine Room; Willow Burgess, Jingles;